After more than 2 decades of success as a leader and mentor in MaryKay, Susan Goodson decided to write a book about loving people who struggle with addiction. She could never have guessed what it would take to write it and what would transpire in her life because of it. This episode will make you laugh, cry, and maybe even cringe a little. If that happens, keep listening because Susan is living proof that it is not easy or comfortable, but our truth always sets us free and opens up the possibility for a more joyful life. So grab a cup of something delicious and an entire box of tissue and a journal and pen so that you can capture every sip of story and sanity and the tears that are sure to fall. What if story is the answer to our crises of meaning and belonging, to our impulse to heal our lives and help others, to our desire and drive to leave this world better than we found it? Now, we love good stories. In fact, we're kind of obsessed, not just with the stories themselves, but with the stories behind the stories. Their oddly perfect timing, the healing process they provoke in their authors, and their capacity to catalyze individual and collective change. And we love exploring these with writers, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, healers, parents, and others. Tune in to hear these stories behind the stories and entertain with us the real possibility that whether you are a teller or a consumer, story is always offering or leading us to an answer. All right, welcome to Sips of Story and Sanity, where we talk about the stories behind the stories with authors, speakers, thought leaders, healers, parents, and more. My team, son Aaron, sister Alyssa, who's not here today, and clients turned friends turned team members, Teddy and Lori, are here to help me make sure that we get the most delicious sips of story and sanity today. So today we have Susan Goodson, who I have known for, oh my goodness, how long? I should have figured this out before we started recording. Lifetimes at least.
I don't remember.
2008.
I always go by the age of my kids. So Matt went to one of your retreats, I think, for MFI, or whatever that was.
Yeah.
It was maybe we've known each other for, how old's Aaron?
I think it's 13 years, Susan. I think it was 2008.
Okay. Well, I know that Aaron was little.
Yep.
And he's not little anymore.
He is not little. Look
nope,
at him.
I definitely am not.
Nope, not anymore.
Oh my goodness, it's been a while. So Susan, after more than 2 decades of success as a leader and mentor in MaryKay, she became a woman's empowerment coach and accountability coach and founded At the Riverbank Coaching. She's the published author of Letting Go of Shame, At the Riverbank, and When God Whispers. She is a painter and a leader helping women who struggle to find their voice and speak their truth. I can't believe all this. Like, I read your bio and I just remember to that first retreat where you're like, no, I'm just writing the book and I don't even really want to do that.
I know. I read my bio and look behind me like, who is that? Is that really me? Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So what inspired, let's go back to this, like, you're moving and grooving and MaryKay, you're at the top of your game. You are technically a coach already, even though you wouldn't necessarily take that title at the moment, but you were coaching everybody. And you got this idea to write a book. How did that happen?
I did not have the idea to write a book. Let's just be clear, folks. This was not my idea. So I met Amanda at a networking event. And of course, I did what I'm supposed to do. And I asked her if I could offer her a complimentary MaryKay facial, because that's what I did. I taught women how to take care of their skin. And Amanda said, sure, that would be great, and so we had her makeover, and I don't remember if it was at that makeover or if it was at a coffee later, because we just had an instant connection. So she says to me, I just want you to know that I'm an editor. And I'm thinking, wow, that's great. So what? And she said, well, the reason probably that our paths have crossed is because you have a book to write. And I'm like, hi, Cal, I have a book to write. Are you kidding me? I don't have a book to write. I'm busy building a MaryKay empire. I've got 3 crazy drug addict kids and, an ex-husband that looks like a human coloring book that I can't control. And you think I should write a book? Well, great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing. And then every time I would see you, you'd go, hey, how's the book? And I'm like, get out of here. There is no book. I'm not writing.
You're the only person I ever did that with.
Like, what do you don't get about no? I'm not doing it. And
the thing was, Susan, is that when I met you, the very first thing that I saw you do was lead a networking meeting. And I watched you inspire people from all different paths. I watched you bring the room to tears. I watched you tell an incredible story that made everyone laugh, cry. And so for me, I was like, it would be a horrible disservice to the world if this woman did not write a book. You clearly had so much, not just content, but delivery capacity, not a lot of people can do that, what you do in front of a room. So,
and I only saw myself as a scared little person in a big person's body who would have a panic attack if I had to stand up in front of people. And yet I did it. And you saw me completely different.
Yeah.
You saw who I is that I refuse to see, because if I saw that in me, I would have to do something different. And I wasn't ready to do that.
Yeah, you did resist it for a while. We had we developed a fast friendship. We met up at the networking meetings. We met up at Panera for coffee breaks and talked business and personal. And we had a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I have this retreat coming. No, I don't want to do that. But you stepped into the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite an experience for me. And I tell this story in our chapter in You Can't Make This Story Up. For me, it was such a huge moment because at the first retreat, I had Teddy, who she just had this beautiful meltdown breakthrough in front of everybody and helped me to realize oh, this is about more than books. And then something happened at that retreat where I started to hear guidance again. I didn't hear it for many, many years. I went into college and I just kind of lost my ear. I lost my connection. And so what happened at that first retreat was that I started to hear again, and I started to get these moments of being guided to do things. And it kind of started at the retreat, but in between, I remember I was trying to get ready for your retreat. And I was walking through a store because I heard the words, get an anchor. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have no idea what that means, get an anchor. And so I'm thinking anchor, I'm thinking, oh, I learned a little bit of NLP. NLP is anchoring something okay, maybe we need something tangible. Maybe it's something that they make, right? And so I'm walking through this craft store trying to figure out what is this anchor thing. And I have too many things to do. I'm supposed to pick up my kid in 3 minutes and it's crazy. And then someone from my childhood shows up and is like, oh, Mandy, how are you? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I just gave up. And the one thing that I had gotten, in addition to some of the trinkets that I got for the retreat gifts, was a paint set for Aaron, because he had told me the night before that he'd run out of his paints. And so I picked it up, and then I was trying to put on the belt, and I'd messed it all up. You're supposed to keep the business and the personal stuff separate. And I was trying to tell the lady I need to pull the paint set out while I'm talking to this lady from my past who I really don't want to be talking to. And I hear the voice say, no, it's for the retreat. That's the anchor. And I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do with a paint set for an anchor? Like, but a few hours into the retreat, I realized that entire situation was really all about you. Because
Wow.
you did the craziest thing. You started to paint with your non-dominant hand. And then
I don't remember much of that either.
It was like otherworldly. Like, I still remember watching you. I remember you being like, I don't want to paint. I remember you being resistant, talking out loud about how, you couldn't get it perfect. So you're going to do it imperfect on purpose with your non-dominant, which I love, by the way, because that's how I met my husband. I was messing up a bulletin board on purpose. And he was like, why aren't you doing it like, organized? And like, because I can't get it perfect. And if I can't get it perfect and it's a little off, that's a mess. But if I do it imperfectly on purpose, it looks awesome. And he was like,
right.
Well, I should have known who I was going to fall in love with at that moment. But I mean, I remember all the resistance. And then I remember watching you paint and thinking, wow, that's something. But it wasn't until a few months later, you were on a trip, right? You were going through, and all of a sudden I start to get pictures of paintings that you were doing.
Right. I started to have dreams about painting. Like that was something I was supposed to do. And so MaryKay had a prize that we could get, that we could earn, which was a paint set. So I'm like, hey, I'll get the paint set. Well, a lot of my friends laughed because they looked at that paint set like it was a gift for their kids. Like, oh, I'll get the paint set for my kids. I said, well, I'm going to get the paint set for me. And then I told Joe when we got in our little Honda Civic to take a 3-month trip across the United States that I was going to bring the paint set. And he's like, you're going to bring that paint set? And I'm like, yeah, and I don't even know why. I'm just going to bring it. And so when we were at the farm, we stayed at his friend's farm in Massachusetts in the hills of the Berkshires for a month. And that's when I took out the paint set. And I started painting with watercolors because I thought that the acrylics smelled really bad and I didn't have turpentine. Well, that's from 50 years ago. Those paints don't smell and you don't need turpentine to clean your brushes. So I started using watercolors and people said, oh, that's the hardest thing to use. Well, nobody told me that. So I just started to paint.
And it was amazing.
Yes.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like, make sure I'm doing this the right way. I had to get one of these.
Yes. Right? That was that was in Falling Waters at the near the house, near whatever his name's house is. I forget his name.
I mean, it was incredible. Like, unleash this crazy talent. So you come to write a book, you become a painter. I mean, I'm like, what's happening? But
yeah, me too. I was thinking the same thing.
Seems like everyone kind of thinks that way.
No, this is not, no. But through this whole process now, I'm just saying yes. Like if the door opens, I just say yes. I have to tell you a quick story right here when it comes to saying yes. I was invited by a pastor to go speak at a women's conference. Now, I hadn't talked to Pastor Rose in like 7 years. And so I'm like, okay. I said, what do you want me to talk about? She said, whatever God lays on your heart. I'm like, okay. Now, usually I want to know how many people are going to be there. How big is the stage? What are all the details? And I didn't do that. I'm just like, I'm going. I'm just going to go. And when I looked at the list of speakers, I was the only white girl. So I was like, okay. So I say to Pastor Rose, I send her a text, is there a dress code? She's like, nope, you can wear whatever you want. So I show up in black leggings and my long MaryKay tailored jacket and a red tank top and my red boots. And these women are dressed like they're going to a cotillion. They have long flowing gowns. And I'm like, uh-oh, I didn't get the memo. Well, I don't have a long flowing gown anyway, so whatever. So she brings me up to the very front of the room. There's like 50 people there. And she has me sit at her table. And then they call up these women to sing. So these women go up to the stage and sing. And they sing. And they sing. And they sing. And they keep singing. And I'm like, okay. And they're speaking in tongues and their hands are in the air. And I'm like, uh-oh. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. And so at one point, then
you
they
missed
brought
a bigger
another
memo.
I did. So then they bring up the singers are done, and I'm praising God quietly that finally the song is done. Because when I go to church, they don't sing for like a half an hour and make you stand up. They like sing for 2 songs. And I'm a recovering Catholic, so I pray like, okay, done. Okay, so then they bring up the prayer person. I'm like, okay, I can do prayer. And she prayed and prayed and prayed. I'm like, oh my God, I have to sit down. I don't have it in me to stand up for this long. So I'm the only white girl sitting down with her head in her hands while everyone else is singing and clapping and praying. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, seriously, what am I doing here? And God said, you are here because you love me. And they are here because they love me. And it doesn't matter how you love me. It matters that you're here. So I thought I knew what I was going to talk about before I got there. And so she says, Susan, come on up to the stage. And I come up to the stage and I'm like, wow, I'm the only white girl here. And you guys pray really long and you sing really loud. And I had to sit down and figure out why I was here. And then I told him that I was here because God said, I love God and they love God. Oh my God, you guys, we laughed and laughed and laughed. It's the first time in my life that I can honestly say I stood in my own skin and celebrated that I wasn't like everybody else and I didn't have to be. And I don't ever recall feeling that way ever before. Like, oh my God, I need to pretend that I'm praying in tongues. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I pray that I can, but I can't. And it made me think of a story when my kids went to visit a friend when I was divorced the very first time and they were young. And they said, oh, Mom, remember we went with, Patty to her church. And I said, yeah. And how was it? And they said, well, they prayed really weird. And she sort of sounded like a sprinkler. And I'm like, what? And he said, Matt said, she sounded like a sprinkler, like she was like going. And I'm like, I think she was speaking in tongues, but I never have heard it. So, and he kept saying it sounded like a sprinkler. So here I am, the only white girl out of dress, and I was there because I love God, and I got to stand in my own truth. It was magical, and I didn't have to control any of it. I just showed up. So I'm learning to just show up.
Yeah, I love that story. This is just like the first story I heard her tell. It made me laugh, cry. No, it's true because I mean, so much of the stress that we experience as we're trying to, get our messages into the world is really just the human stress of like, am I going to be accepted? Are people going to reject me? Is everyone going to think I'm stupid? Am I like, really, those are the things that I see more often than not stop people.
Right. The who do you think you are? The old messages from childhood, which I now stop. And even working with my clients now, I say, whose voice is that? I said, that's not your voice. Whose voice is that? And they stop. And oftentimes it's their parents, it's their mother, it's their, it's their babysitter, whoever was giving them, putting on them labels. It wasn't me that put labels on me, it was them. And so now I get to say, whose voice is that? And is it my truth? And if it isn't my truth, I can let it go. And for a long time, I couldn't, because I felt like I was betraying my parents if I didn't believe the way they believed. And now I realize that that was their belief and they were doing the best they could with that, but that didn't have to be mine. So there's a lot that I brought from childhood that I don't believe anymore, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and that was a big part of our conversations around your book, because you started out talking about being the mother of addict children, but as we started talking, we realized like this was your life pattern. It started early, that you had always been around addictive behavior, and so tell us a little bit about that process as far as what you really had to sort through, because again, another thing that I see people really struggling with is like, now I have to tell stories, and it's okay to like doctor fictionalize some stories, but when they're your parents, you can't really do that. And when they're your children, you can't really do that. So what was that process like for you, getting real about all of that in your life, and then going through the process of sorting out if it was okay for you to tell these stories?
Well, I think there was a time, and I don't know the exact timeline. I think I was still writing the book, and I was invited to share my story at an Al-Anon meeting in Santa Maria, which is where my parents lived. And so my mom and dad took me out to dinner, and my dad said, are you okay with me being in the room while you tell your story? And I said, I'm totally okay. The question is, are you going to be okay? Because what I'm going to share is my story. It's not yours. And I recognized, I don't know how old I was, and I don't know when I really understood that I would dim my light because other people were afraid of it. I knew that there was something special about me, but I was never going to own that. I remember going to, where was I? I was in therapy. Somebody told me when I was pregnant with Sean, I think, and Sean's 38, they said, you're a powerful woman. And I said, no, I'm not. Powerful people hurt people. I'm not going to own that. I don't want to be. I'm not going to. No, I'm not. And so I recognized that people were afraid of that in me. And it was my job to go small. It was my job to go quiet, because it was my job to make sure that everybody was okay. And that started when I was really little, I remember my mom telling me that when I was 2 weeks old and I would cry at night, they'd leave me alone to cry myself to sleep for 3 hours because Dr. Spock said, don't let a child control your home. So they fed me. They didn't, I didn't have any pins, sticking in me. And I learned at 2 weeks old that it doesn't matter how long or how loud you cry. People aren't going to hear you. So you better learn to shut down your voice. And I did. I did for a long time. I wanted my mom to be comfortable. I wanted my dad to be comfortable. And then something inside of me said, no more, no more. If they're uncomfortable, that belongs to them. I am not going to keep secrets anymore. So I told my ex-husband, I said, I want to write a book. How do you feel about that? And he's like, okay. I said, it's my story, about us. And I don't think he's ever read it. And I think if he did, he'd hate me forever because it got pretty messy in there. The kids said, are you going to use our real names? I'm like, yeah, those are your names, right? And they went, yeah. I said, I'm changing your dad's name because he owns a business. And so out of respect for him, I want to keep his anonymity. People could put the dots together. But I remember Matt called me one time and he's like, hey, Mom, did you put in the book that I went to jail? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, oh. And I said, did you not read the book? And he's like, no. And I said, what's the matter? And he's like, well, I gave it to the accountant at my work to read it. And her husband's a cop. And in the book, I went to jail. And I'm like, oh, you might have wanted to read the book first, son. And so he went to the accountant and he said, I don't know what my mom wrote in that book. And she said, Matt, it's okay, because we all have a story. And then she proceeded to tell him about how she was abandoned with her brother when she was 10 and he was 8. And it opened up a dialogue of truth for the two of them to share because I wrote a book about truth.
Yeah.
And I was scared. I thought my dad's sister, did not know there was abuse in our home. And it altered our relationship forever. But I thought, you know what? It is what it is. And if the world is uncomfortable with my truth, then I think they have some growing to do. And I'm not going to get in the way of them doing their own personal growth. I'm not here to make the world feel okay. I'm not here to make people feel unsafe, but I'm not here to keep anybody's secrets anymore. And I won't.
Yeah.
So I was scared that nobody would like it. Nobody would buy it. Nobody would believe it. Everybody would be mad at me. And then the process took 2 years. And I thought, am I ever going to have this baby? Because I can't stand it anymore. Hurry up. I have to have it. Let it be done. And it took 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a big project because you were doing a lot more than just writing a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot more.
And I recognize today that what I learned writing that book is that every life experience is a contraction. It's a life contraction that takes me to a place of new birth. And contractions hurt. And so every time I go through one of those, tight little places, I'm like, it's just part of the birthing of something new. So, find your focal point, do your deep breathing, and it won't, it hurt for a year. It hurts.
It'll
for
be over by.
Yeah.
What was that song you used to sing all the time?
Yeah. It was a magical experience. And it was received well. And one of the women that went on the retreat bought the book, I don't know, 6 years ago. And she said, you changed my life. And she said, so when you said you were going to have a retreat, I had to meet you in person. I just had to meet you. And I'm like, it's just me. I mean, I'm like, just like a mom, and she's like, oh my God, and then I had to bring my friends. So she brought 4 of her friends, to meet me. And they're like, who is this woman? And she's like, oh my God, I get to be in the same room with her. I mean, I feel like that about Brene Brown, like, oh my God, she said, she's changed my life. And so when Patty said that, I'm like, Patty, it's just me, so it's funny when other people see you in a different light because of how your courage helped them change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, just being able to, that is one of your most amazing qualities on the page and on stages, like you described in that in that story that you told about going in front. Like there's all kinds of factors of that story that are so cringy right now in our culture, right? Like it's just
Right.
it's so cringy to even talk in those terms, and yet you owning your truth leveled it all out with like, yeah, but the thing that ties us all together is that we love God.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny how I got all tripped up in myself about how different we are? Like that's ridiculous.
Right. It was, and it was God inspired, because if I had gone into my head, I would have done that dialogue of, uh-oh, you can't say that, you can't say that. So I just dropped into my heart. And it's like, we all knew it. I mean,
Right.
they all stood there and said, she's the only white girl in the room. You might as well call it what it is. I'm like, here I am, and I'm not, I'm a little nervous about this. And, I didn't show up in the right clothes, but I showed up. So yeah, we all got to laugh, and it broke the ice. And numerous people came up and said, thank you for sharing your story, it touched me, and they laughed with me. And and I'm sure that along the way some people will be offended, and okay, I just figure that that's part of their journey to do their own work, whatever that work is.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not like you're careless. You're super careful,
No,
I know. And so, and
no.
that comes across, it changes the tone of voice, it changes the presentation, and yeah, I mean, it's literally like the first thing I remember about you is just thinking, wow, she is being so freaking honest right now. Whoa, I need to get to know
Wow.
her.
I love that. I love that that came across, because that's not how I felt. That's not how I saw myself. I saw myself as scared. And now I usually will just say that, like I had to speak. This was some years ago at a MaryKay function. And they said, okay, you're going to speak at 1:00. And I always felt like I was going to throw up every time I would have to do something like that. And so I'm in the director's room, and somebody comes in and says, is Susan Goodson in the room? And I'm like, yeah, I'm right here. And they're like, well, you have to teach right now. And I'm like, oh no, it's 11:00 right now. I teach at 1:00. And they're like, oh no, you're teaching right now. They're waiting for you. And there were like 450 people sitting there waiting for me. So I get up on the stage and I'm like, okay, you all know that fear and excitement feel the same, right? Okay. Well, I'm just here to tell you that I'm really, really excited. And the staff member brings me a glass of water, because he's like, oh my God, I think she's going to pass out or pee her pants, and I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to teach at 1:00. And once I outed myself, I was like, okay, now I can get on with it. And it was great. So I don't want to pretend, if I stand in front of people and I feel like I'm going to throw up, I'm like, okay, y'all, who's got a really big purse? Because I feel like I'm going to throw up right now and I need a safe place to put it. They're like, I do. And I'm like, great. Okay, let's get on with it. So, because more often than not, they'd all be feeling the same way if they had to stand up there.
Absolutely.
So let's do it.
Yeah. And I think most of the time people are just grateful that it's not them up on the stage,
Yep. So when I can speak to not only my fear, but to their fear, when I say I am celebrating the beauty of the mess of my story, and you get to do the same thing, everybody sort of just goes, oh, okay, let's just talk heart to heart. And that's what we do. That's where it gets intimate, even with 450 people.
Yeah, absolutely. So what were the things, if you were like really owning this, like I'm telling my story, I am just gonna do it, what were some of the things? You said it took you 2 years. So what were some of the things that you felt created delays and detours and frustrations? And what were some of those challenges that you faced?
Well, part of it was the pain of writing it. You know, I was so invested in you and I. And when I had to step away from that to honor Joe and my trip that we were going to take, that was really hard for me, because at that point, I still felt like I wanted you to be proud of me. You know, I wanted to be the best student ever. I wanted to be that first woman on stage. I wanted to sell more books than anybody else in the whole wide world. I was going to be the one, you know. And so then when I came back and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to pass you on to my team, I went, she's going to pass me on to her team? And because at that point, I did not have enough courage to say to you, that's not okay with me. I am so invested in you that when you say you're going to pass me off to your team, it's like being the oldest daughter of a home with 5 kids, and one more kid now has come along, and I have to make room for them, and I have to do it with a smile on my face. Hell no. No, I am not going to be passed along. And if I had told you that, you may have said, oh, I totally get it. Okay, we'll work together. But I didn't.
Or I would have told you, because it was all a huge misunderstanding, that for the audience, we did not figure out until how many years later? It was 2011. So I think this was like 10 years later, we had this conversation.
Yep.
While we're working on this book.
Because my style has always been to retreat. See, I'm not going to tell you that because that's too risky. So I disappear.
Yeah.
I step away. I go into hiding. I go figure out what I'm going to do now. I'm not going to let anybody get hurt, including me. So I disappear. And it's only been probably in the last year that I lean into those hard conversations, because we never talked about anything in my childhood. We never talked about anything in my first 2 marriages. And when I try to talk to Joe many times, he doesn't understand. And so I'm like, I'm not doing this. So I publicly apologize to my original editor, Amanda Johnson, who I should have stayed with, and it would have been such a wonderful journey, but I was a chicken shit. And so I left and I went someplace else. So we all missed out, but then she invited me back in because of her emotional intelligence. And now I have some, and so we're good. Okay. So that being said.
No, wait, I have to tell my side of the story now. Because I remember where I was when we had the conversation. I was sitting on the floor in my grandmother's beach house. And I was so like, we were getting ready to do the first round of book production. So the team that you heard was that I had a book production person coming on board to help with that part of it. And that I needed editors because I knew that I wasn't going to see as much. So I was going to have other people be part of it. And so everything was growing way faster than I felt like I could manage it. And yet I had made all of these promises to people that we would be on stage and there would be a celebrity there and it was going to be amazing. And I'm like looking, I just remember like the computer, just a million windows open and crap all over, like paperwork and notes everywhere. And I'm talking to you and I'm like, oh no, because I heard you didn't say that you felt rejected, but I heard it. I could feel it. And I also didn't know how to say like, hey, what's that really about? Because I was so messed up, stressed out. And it was awful. It was an awful moment because I felt like I had failed you. Like you're going to go find someone better than me. That, you know what I mean? Like, because I have my own stories, my own little kid stories going in the background, like, oh my gosh, I failed this person. And she's, you know, what do I do? Like, oh, and crap, never mind the fact that she's like one of my dearest friends. because, you know, my clients are never just clients. We always turn into friends because we do the thing that you're talking about. We share the deepest stories. And oh, I just remember like I had like your whole thing was about letting go, right? And like that was the whole message of your book. And I heard that voice say, you got to let her go. And I was like, which is why I ended up coming to your I had to be at your first gallery showing that you did. And I had to get this picture of the bridge that disappears into the forest because it was so representative of how I felt about like what you being on my journey taught me was that we have these ideas about how it's going to go, who's going to be there to support us, how long they're going to be there, what the whole thing is going to look like. And then all that stuff happens and it changes. And sometimes it changes for the better. Usually it changes for the better. But like you were saying earlier, like the process feels like crap, you know?
I
It
know.
really does. But I mean, I wish that we had both had big girl pants on that day and that we could have like cleared it up and not had 10 years of making up stories. But it was also like one of those really crucial lessons for me of
Yeah.
letting go of the outcome and recognizing that, you know, Teddy's been in the background this whole time, hearing me tell the stories of my clients of like, you know, what this one teaches me and what that one teaches me and how, and you know this probably as a coach now and after doing, you know, raising your children and being through this whole process is like, we're only here to do what we're here to do on a person's journey.
Right.
We think we know what that is, but sometimes it's just planting a seed. Sometimes it's just getting the book going.
Right.
Sometimes it's
My book would not be here if it weren't for you. But what happened when I let go of you is I walked next door to bring cookies to the neighbor next door. She had just moved in. And so I brought her some cookies and we were talking and I said something about, you know, I'm the daughter of an alcoholic. And she said, oh, my mother was an alcoholic. And I said, and I'm writing a book and my editor and I are not in a relationship at the moment. And I need a new editor. And she said, oh, well, hold on a second. My nephew is calling. So her nephew called at that moment, who just happened to be writing a book, who just happened to tell her who the editor was that he was working with, who just happened to become the editor that I ended up working with. So it was all part of my lesson of turning away isn't the best way to do it. So I don't do that anymore, but also recognizing that you were not my mother either. So for me to stay in that place when I was uncomfortable, because it was more important to me to have your approval as a mom figure, not because you're older than I am, but because you were a person of authority. You know, you were that person that had the idea. You were in charge. You were the head of, and yeah. So the book would not be here if it weren't for you. And probably I would not be a coach had it not been for the process of the book at first. I love how God takes my old behavior patterns and brings them full circle so that I don't miss out when I'm making decisions that when I'm making decisions that aren't the best for me, but they're the only decisions I can make with the tools that I have. You know, it's not like he says, oh, you idiot, you just blew it. He says, oh, honey, you could have made a different choice. Here, let me help you circle around, even if it takes 10 years.
Yeah. Well, and I remember because you came to the first monetized retreat that we did where we had Ursula and a bunch of people come and talk about like the potential business around the book.
Oh.
And this was the moment where you coined the phrase that is now on the back of my book, which is, why can't I write this effing book? Like all I want to do is write this effing book. Like, I remember, well, have you thought about being a coach? And I just remember you looking at me literally like your 3-year-old defiant self and being like, all I want to do is write an effing book. Like, I thought you were just going to get up and stomp out of the retreat.
And it's the same thing now. When people say, okay, now as a coach, you have to have your business plan, and then how many reach out calls you get. I'm like, look, I just want to coach. Okay. I don't want to have to do all that other stuff. I don't know how to do all that techie stuff. I don't know what a link tree is. I don't know what a tree link is. I don't know what whatever all those things you're talking about. I just want to be a coach. So I can still feel her. Like, okay, honey, come on. Do it your way. You don't have to do it, everybody else's way. But honestly, in this Power Mind Master group that I put in, and they're like, okay, let's do a landing page. I'm like, what's a landing page? They're like, okay, let's do a QR code. I'm like, what's a QR code? I just want to be a coach. I don't know how to do all this other stuff. Well, I'm learning slowly, but it's not. My 3-year-old is like, let's get the hell out of here. This is not.
Man, I loved your 3-year-old. It was so much fun. I have to tell you that we all changed our Facebook banners black and flew our flags at half mast. When you walked away, the light dimmed. It was just, it was like,
We all felt the loss.
oh, we all felt the loss. And it was like, how do we get back going to that? You were such a fun part of the team. It was so fun.
God.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Oh, and the stupid waiting song. I'd get in the car and I'd be like, I'm waiting on you, Lord, and I am hopeful. This is bullshit. How long is it going to take? I got home and Joe was pissed off. He took too long to get home. I'm like, leave me the hell alone. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to go back. Oh God, it was just one of the most wonderful experiences of my life.
Okay, I think that kind of leads me to my question.
Yeah.
There were 2 different parts in your story that really caused me to take pause and think about my story, because you and I have some things that we could commiserate about. Okay. So one of them was when you're talking about that healing forgiveness that you've experienced with some of your family. And the second one is when, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, when you took that 3-month trip and you decided to do you and Joe. Joe's your husband's name, right?
Right.
You and Joe over Amanda's book and being on stage and yourself and the glory and being her #1 bestseller, and all of that. So I know for me that as I've gone through that healing story process, the men in my life at times are my biggest fans and my greatest cheerleaders. But then when there are times when, I think it's usually when I hit up against another story that needs to be healed, that they seem to be my biggest adversity and my biggest pain in the butt. And so I'm just curious what your experience has been, and how has that forgiveness and then the choice to do us instead of me played into your experience? How's that for a long question?
Well, and you know what, too? I don't know if you knew this, Lori, if we put that in the chapter, but her husband was at the retreat with her.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
He's going to work on his own book. So that adds a whole other dynamic.
Okay, that does add a whole
over to
level,
you, Susan.
Yeah. And part of what happened, part of my struggle with stepping into me is that I was, and sometimes still am, afraid that I'm going to have to leave behind the people I love. And, and there's that part of me that is married to Joe. And then I get so frustrated with being the caregiver. and that part of him that's critical, you know, and I engage. I mean, I know that it's not just him. I know that there are certain things that I do that I'm trying to learn so that I don't participate in the dysfunctional dance that we have sometimes. But I'm like, I'm leaving. I'm done. I'm getting a divorce. I'm out of here. And God says, no, you're not. And I'm like, oh, yes, I am. You're not the boss of me. You know, I mean, my brothers and sisters were always like, you're not the boss of me. And so I say to God, hey, you're not the boss of me. I can do whatever I want to do, you know? And so I stay and I learn the lesson. And so when it comes to forgiveness, that's, I think the more I step into, I do a lot of writing at the riverbank. I go to the riverbank in my head and I see Jesus there. And what's happened over the last couple of years is that he has become the father to me that I never had with my own dad. So I feel like I go to the riverbank as a 3-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 50-year-old. You know, sometimes I go with a backpack and I have hot chocolate and I've got chocolate chip cookies. And sometimes I go feeling very heavy. And sometimes I go wanting to punch him in the face, and he knows it. You know, I'm like, one of my journeys to the riverbank had red punching gloves. And I get there and he's like, hey, what's going on with you? And I'm like, oh, I just am so ready to get in a freaking fight with you. And he's like, really? Talk to me about that. And I'm like, you know, you're all over me all the time. It's all about me growing. What about my husband? He's being an idiot. I don't, you know, why am I always the one that has to do the work? And God's like, honey, I already got you on my calendar. Okay. But right now it's about you and me. And I'm like, oh no. It's been you and me for months. What about him? You know, I mean, I just go and I just like put it all out there. And he loves me. You know, he says, I'm listening. You know, I see you. I hear you. I'm like, it isn't fair. And he said, no, it isn't. And I'm like, well, fix it then. And he said, I can't fix it. I'm like, you're God. Yes, you can. And he said, I am God, but I can't fix this one. And as I went through that, I learned to forgive me. I learned to forgive me, and I began to focus on the things that I got from the people that wounded me the most, that benefited me. Like, my dad was an abusive alcoholic, but my dad was incredibly creative. And I got a lot of that from him. And my mother, you know, who was a scared woman, as most wives of alcoholics are, she was the writer. She was the word person. She was the one who taught me about God. And so as I gather from the people that I was hurt by, I can then say thank you and let go of the things that they did that harmed me. You know, and I was talking to a client this morning and I said, you know, I sometimes go up to the gravesite and I sit with them and I'm like, you totally did not prepare me. I mean, I am inept in many areas because you didn't teach me. And then I go, but these are the things that you did give me. And one of the things that I worked very, very hard on was the relationship with my first husband. He walked out when the kids were 2, 3, and 7, and he got married right away. And I don't know if he was having an affair, and it's not mine to know, but I felt betrayed and I felt really hurt. And it took a long time for me to forgive him. I was, you know, I wanted to write an article for the big newspaper up in Port Townsend where he lived to say what a dick he was, you know, like, you guys really need to know who this man is. You know, he's a betrayer. And, you know, and I knew they'd go, scorned wife, liar, liar, you know, pants on fire. We're going to love him even more. So I'm like, okay, so I won't do that. And I just kept trying to find the good. Find the good, Susan. So I remember the kids said, "Hey, Mom, hold on a second. What? Whoop! I'm back. Mom, what do you love about Dad?" And I'm like, your dad was very loyal to his country." What? What does that mean? I'm like, your dad is a Marine at heart. Let me tell you, he will fight to his death for our freedoms, because that's the only thing about him that I could even think that I liked, because everything else about him I hated. But I thought, find something good, Susan, find something good. You can find something good. And then I would go visit the kids and they're like, "Oh, Mom, you know, if you come into Washington, Dad's going hunting. He's going to go kill something." I'm like, "Great. All right. So he's going to leave the state when I come to town because he has to go kill something." Well, thank God it isn't me. And then, you know, I'd go to Washington. And I worked really, really hard on being kind. And they're like, why are you so nice to him? And I said, because that's who I am. "Yeah, but he's not nice to you." And I said, that's not about me. I want to be kind. So I remember 3 years ago when our granddaughter got her finger stuck in a door and they thought they were going to have to amputate it. And my older son, who lived in California, called and said, "Mom, you know, they think they might have to amputate her finger." And I said, and Joe said, do you want to go north? And I said, I do. So I bought Matt's ticket and I said, let's go. And I said, the only thing is, I don't know where we can stay. So ask your dad if we can stay with him. And so Matt reached out and said, "Dad, we're coming to Washington. Can Mom and I stay with you?" And he said, "Yeah." Now, his wife wasn't even there. She was in Sacramento for 9 months, taking care of a sister who was dying of cancer. And so Matt and I went and stayed with my ex-husband. And it was the first time in 35 years we had been under the same roof at the same time.
Wow.
And I remember Matt and his daughter stayed in the tent outside and I stayed in the spare room. And Matt was leaving to go out into the trailer. And he's like, "I love you." And I said, "I love you." And then his dad said nothing. And I said, "And he loves you too." And he looked at me and I'm like, "Well, you do. You just don't say it, but you do." And so we had this wonderful time together. I told him, you know, how I felt about him leaving. And I told him that it hurt me. And he told me what it felt like when I got some of his retirement money. And he told me about what it was like for him to be around our boys when they drink, and that it wasn't because he didn't love them, it's because he didn't feel safe around them. And I took it as he was judging them, and he said, that's not why. So we got to clear the air. And so, and then 3 months ago, we went on a family camp out. And he and his wife were there, and Joe and I were there, and 2 of our kids were there, and the grandkids were there. And now currently, you know, 6 weeks ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer that's in his bone and in his lymph nodes. And God and I had a dialogue around that. And I'm like, I want to call him. And he said, why? And I said, because these are our children, and I want to help our children through this. And he said, why do you need to call him? He said, why do you need him to help your children navigate through this? And I said, I guess I don't. Okay, then I'm going to text him. And God said, why do you need to text him? And I'm like, because he said, do you think he wants to hear from you? And I'm like, I don't know. Okay, I won't text him. I'm going to write him a letter. And he's like, okay, why do you need to write him a letter? And I'm like, because it's too hard for me to stand on the outside of this circle and not be a part of it. He was my first love, and I don't get to be a part of it. So Matt called me and said, Mom, I think Dad needs an angel blanket. And I said, honey, I don't have any, but I'll see if I can get one made before you go up there. And so Matt went up there on last week and he gave his dad an angel blanket. And his dad texted me and said, Matthew gave me my blanket. And I wrapped myself in it. And I thank you with all my heart. And if you don't know everything that's going on, we can talk about it. Now, I haven't had a chance to talk about it, but the work that I did has now allowed me to be invited into the circle. I wanted to make it happen, and God said, no, you have to wait to be invited. And I'm like, but he's married to someone else and I still love him. And he said, you can still love him and you can still love your husband. Because I made you to love, Susan. That's what I made you to do. And you don't have to feel like you're betraying one for the other. He will always be your first love. He will always be the father of your children. So now I know that I have to call him because I have to share with him my process. I get to share that with him and I will share that with him. I don't know when, but I wanted to insinuate myself into this story and God said, you can't. It's not yours. It was yours. It's not yours now. And so I stand on the sidelines and I support my children and I reach out to them. And, but every Father's Day, I send him a text, and he sent me a Mother's Day text this year. And he said, our children are who they are because of you. And I said, but without you, they wouldn't be here. So it's because of us. And so I learned to step out of my ego. Even though I struggle with self-righteous anger, look at everything I've done. He walked away when the kids were in the middle of their addiction and then they go be with him. I had all of that. But more than anything, I just want to be a vessel of love, except when I'm on the freeway. And if people do not drive the speed limit, or they're in the carpool lane and they only have one person, when I have to sit in all that line while they just like cheat, oh, I am
Amen.
not forgiving. I don't know if that answers your question, but
That was, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That definitely answered my question and touched me to my core.
I'm so glad.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And you're a beautiful lady. And the fact that you can have that relationship with God. I love my relationship with my Heavenly Father. And there are so many things that we can do with his help. And you've shown that he helps us. Sometimes he takes us that long way around because we're not willing to listen. And I love that analogy. But yeah, love and forgiveness and kindness have played such a important role for me. And so I love that, touches me, like I said, to my core. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
After making me cry.
I know.
Me too.
It's
really
really, well, it's been absolutely amazing, even sometimes from a distance, to watch you doing all of this work. And I'm so glad that we got to clear the air earlier this year, and I'm so glad that you wrote your chapter in this book, because there are a lot of people who are they are stuck and feeling, they're singing the waiting song, they're just waiting. And I mean, I don't know how many times in the coaching process that I say, like, it's okay. You can let go of that timeline because there's something else. Well, what else could? I'm like, I don't know. I just know, largely because of you, Susan, and the journey that I took before I watched yours, is like there's something else that has to happen before it can complete. You know, there's something that we have to, some part of our own story that we have to write differently before we can finish writing the story. And it's just been incredible to witness your journey and hear that you're coaching people now. I mean, it just makes me so happy.
It, you know, I never understood field of favor before. Never understood. I mean, I've been in MaryKay for 42 years. And I always struggled with, you know, feeling like I fit, because my questions that I've asked them for years, you know, somebody has surgery on their fingers, they have rheumatoid arthritis, their fingers are all bent, you know, they earn all these diamond rings and they can't get them on their hands. And so I'm like, what life lesson did you take from that? I mean, what experience did you get from having to live through that? And you know what these people would say? They're like, Susan, you're we're not in a therapy session. And I'm like, but what is this all about? I mean, why are we here? I mean, I ask those kind of questions and they're like, look, we just want you to teach these people how to book an appointment. I'm like, they already know how. What's stopping them? That's what I want to know. What lives underneath them? What, you know, and they're like, oh, stop it. You know, just lighten up. What? Lighten up? What does that mean? Does that mean like, you know, suck on a popsicle stick or something and pretend that everything's like, I don't know how to do that. You know, that's like saying lose 10 pounds in 5 minutes. I don't know what that means. And so now that I'm in it, and now that I'm doing it, and now that I'm watching their growth, but also watching my growth, because I can't watch them grow without doing my own growth, it's magical. And the only part that I have ever struggled with is the same thing I always struggle with. No, let me rephrase that. Up until this point, I struggled with money, but now I don't struggle with it anymore, because I always thought that if this was a gift, you had to give it away. And I'm learning that there's a difference between serving and giving. God never said, I want you to do something you really hate so that you can do what you love and give it away for free. He never said that. He said, you can use your gifts that I gave you to make a living and be joyful at the same time. I thought, well, that's different. So when I have to do the ask for money, I still think, you know, I had to fight with the guilt of that. You know, like if you're writing a book or you're writing your story, that's great. God downloaded that into you, but to ask for money, to ask for someone to buy that book when this was a gift from God, aren't you supposed to just like give it to him? And I learned, no, God wants me in my field of favor so that when I am making a living, I am joyfully making a living. I am happy in this space. I didn't know what that felt like before. I didn't know what it felt like to be joyful. I didn't. I spent my whole life trying to keep my head above water. That when joy began to come into my heart, I didn't quite know what that was. I didn't have to earn it or fight for it. I just got to experience it. So it's like, you know, how do I accept this without going back to that place of another shoe is going to drop and hit me behind the head? And now I'm just like, God doesn't throw shoes. You know, that may have been your earthly father, but God doesn't throw shoes. God
You may
just
want to
said,
throw some shoes at him from time to time.
oh yeah,
But, you know.
he's good at dodging the shoes. You know, he knows how to disappear. So I was like, ha ha, you didn't get me. But he's like, throw away, honey. Just keep throwing them out. Throw darts at me if you need to. I'm good. And then the magic happens.
Yeah, because I mean, it really is energy, right? Like money is just whatever intention we put on it. It's just,
Right.
it's paper. It's not even really very valuable these days, right?
Right.
But it represents something. It represents a person's willingness, desire, determination, perseverance, commitment to the thing that they're paying for.
Right.
And so if we don't give them that opportunity, that, I mean, I don't know about you if you've experienced this, but the people that I have done super duper discounts for, or ushered in on scholarships or something over the years, because my heart was breaking, I was like, this has to happen for them, they don't stick around for long.
No.
Because they're not putting any of their own energy in.
Right. There's no investment. There's no skin in the game. And I
Yeah.
say that now. I say, you know what? If you don't put some skin in the game, you could have this, but you wouldn't use it.
Mhm.
And I'm okay if you're not ready.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought up the generosity factor, because I know I've had several clients speak about that. Like, they don't want to not be generous. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but you can't be generous if you're frustrated with people because they're not paid, they're taking your
Right.
time, you're generously giving your time and your expertise and all of these things, and there's no reciprocity. That is just a recipe for resentment.
Absolutely.
Like complete frustration and resentment over time, because then you're doing all the things. But again, that's how many of us in this community were raised around addicts or narcissists or abusive types, where that was kind of how we got along, right? We just kind of like did all the things to try to make everything okay. And we didn't
Right.
expect anything back because we knew that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, you put a few decades behind that story and you start to feel it in your body, right? Piling up with resentment and all those things of like, I
The
would go ahead.
The other thing that got in my way was the idea that I wanted to be a good girl. You know, a good girl is the girl that gives you the last piece of pie. You know, she's very generous. But what I learned was, Amanda, you're like, oh, I'd like the last piece of pie. And I'm like, oh, I'm such a good girl. Here, have it. And then I'm thinking, you bitch, I hate your flipping guts. I'm going to hate you till the day you die because you just took the piece of pie that I wanted. So instead of saying, maybe we can share the pie because I'd like some too. How about that? Oh no, the good girl in me, the honorable child, the honorable woman who now is filled with hatred, gives you the gift of pie. And so I learned that is not giving. That is not free. That is not kindness. That's a lie. So I'd rather share with you, I really want this pie and I don't want to give any to you. But if you're okay, I'll share it with you. Sure, that would be great. That's a win-win. Okay. But it's really, what I'm recognizing today is the adult woman in me. I get it. I get it. But that little girl, she's the one that says, oh no, not one more time.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't want to do this. She's the one that speaks the truth. And now I get to integrate as an adult with her and say, tell me what's going on. I'm tired of giving. I'm tired of being so generous. I'm like, okay, let's sit with that for a while, because you're right. I do. I force you to give. I force you to be nice. I force you to play well with others. I remember when my granddaughters were here and they were little. They're 22 and 20 now. And Jessie said, I think maybe she was 6, and she said to the 4-year-old, she's like, give me your toy. And Brianna's like, no. And Jessie's like, you have to share. And I said, you know, honey, she doesn't have to share right now. That's her toy. And if she wants to hold on to it, she gets to hold on to it. And I remember that those old voices of, you have to give yourself away so that the world will think you're good. Well, you know what? Think I'm bad now. If that's how you see me, then go ahead and see me that way, because I can't keep doing it. I don't want to keep doing it that way. It's dishonest. I don't want to be dishonest. I don't want to hate you.
Yeah, it's amazing how the process of the creative process, and especially the process of launching a business, it really is, you know, one of my mentors for many years ago used to say it's like it is a spiritual journey. Like, that's what you're signing up for. And you may not know it, and you might miss the whole thing. You might miss the entire spiritual arc and all of the amazing treasure that is there for you. But that's what this really is, because it has you have to ask the most essential questions. You have to ask, like, who am I? What am I worth? What is my gift worth?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do I be with other people in the world in a way that is, you know, good business, but also good human? Are those two things compatible? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really such a, you know, no wonder a lot of people just close the books and walk away, because it's hard. It's hard.
It
It's
is.
very confrontational. And so your message of truth at all costs, I really hope that is like one of the big things that people take away from this conversation is, I so appreciate that, the courage that takes to just say, nope, this is what's real for me. And your discomfort is your discomfort, not mine, because I'm doing what I need to do. We just recorded a podcast with Don Bennett, and that was one of the things that Teddy was sharing. It's like, people are taking care of themselves, like this realization that it's okay for people to take care of themselves. Well, we allow other people to take care of themselves all the time, but we're just terrible at doing it for ourselves. Like, us too, me too, I get to also, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm learning to let myself be first without a feeling of selfishness.
Yeah.
Putting myself first isn't selfish for me today. It's healthy. It's necessary. It's so that I can be a kind and loving human being in an honest and loving way. And I don't have to self-sacrifice anymore to be good, because I am good. I am kind. I am loving. And I'm allowed to take care of myself.
Except when you're on the freeway. We established that.
Oh my God. Oh my. I pray. I pray every time I get on the freeway.
I know.
I start counting the cars of the people that are breaking the rules. And then I want to buy a red and blue light and pull up behind them and turn the light on and let them poop their pants and then wave at them as I go by, like, you are breaking the rules. So, and then, you know, basically God said, you can drive in the carpool lane with nobody else. I'm like, no, I can't. He said, yeah, you can. You might get a ticket. I'm like, I don't want a ticket. He said, well, I guess they don't care about getting a ticket because they're driving in the carpool lane with one person, but you can too if you want. So then I shut up and I mind my own business. And then I try to get to where I'm going safely, and that others get to where they're going safely too. But it is my greatest challenge, I swear. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, I mean, if that's your greatest challenge, I'd say you're winning.
Okay, I feel I'm winning too.
Yeah, I definitely think you're winning.
Well, for the moment, that is my greatest challenge. Give me 5 minutes and I'll find something else. But right now, That's it.
Oh, so speaking of the next 5 minutes, what's next for you? You just you've just facilitated this amazing retreat, and what's next? You got another book coming along, you got more painting, more retreats.
What's next is launching my 6-month coaching program, which will start January 1st and go through June. I've already made a down payment on the next place we're going to have our retreat, which is in Lincoln City at a home on the beach. So I'll be working on that. And I would like to do more private coaching. I'm looking to probably add 5 more private one-on-one coaching clients starting probably the first of the year. It's a challenge for me I know the value of writing down goals, and I've no longer, you were one of the ones that taught me about this. I don't like calling things goals anymore. Goals feel too finite for me. So I like intentions, and you've taught me about intentions. But what I find is that if I just continue to show up every day, what I need is given to me. It's brought to me. So I still write my goals down, and I have them sitting up here, signed 2 more people to my 6-month program, fill up my retreat for next year, 5 connection calls a month. But really what's next for me is to experience every bit of life on a daily basis that I can possibly experience, and be present to the moment and release my attachment to results. That's what's next for me.
I love it.
Do I want to make a ton of money? I'm not even sure. I want to make enough money so that I can go see my children and grandchildren. I have to tell you, we went and saw Katie's kids on our way home from our trip to Washington. We took a trip to Washington, road trip, 2,400 miles in 8 days. I did all the driving. I didn't even think I could do that. And so we went to Katie's house, and Katie's not vaccinated, and and that's her choice, but it scares Joe a little bit. So he didn't want to stay in the house. So we just visited for a very short period of time, but the girls are like, hey, Grandma, come on outside. We're going to do somersaults and headstands. And I'm like, yay, let's do that. I'm all in. And so the 7-year-old does her headstand, and I'm like, hey, I can do this too. I used to do headstands. So I run and sort of throw myself onto the ground up against the fence to try to do a headstand, come falling down. My right arm squishes my right boob, hurts my ribs. I'm laying there on the ground, and the 3-year-old comes running up to me with my glasses and my phone, and she's like, here, Grandma, here's your phone and your glasses. I'm like, oh, thanks, honey. And Joe's like, what the hell were you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's the most spontaneous I've been in 65 years. I just figured I could do a headstand, and I just about killed myself. But boy, I'll tell you, I had the most fun with those grandkids. Those are the things that I want to do. I mean, I don't want to hurt myself.
More of that, more of the fun, less of the falling on your head.
You have to practice those things. That's what my granddaughters were in gymnastics, and so when they got to the back bends, I would sit there and I'd like, okay, I used to do this, right? So I practiced going down the wall so that when I could see them, I could do a back bend too.
Like, isn't that just like me though? I want to know how to do it. I don't want to learn how to do it. I want to know how to do it right now. Let me do it right now. That has been my mantra. You mean I have to learn to write a book? Can't I just write it? Can I just do a headstand? Why do I have to practice? No, I'm just going to do it. Well, you get hurt that way. So
I was going to say, how about working out for you?
I'm so glad nobody took a video of it.
Oh, it would have gone viral though. Could have been good for business.
I could have put it on on TikTok. And then I would have been famous for being the grandma who crushed her breast while trying to do a headstand. Sorry, Aaron. Do you want- Oh, poor Aaron. He's got to live all of this girl stuff.
Man, story of my life. It's all good.
He's such a trooper.
I'm just here for the story loops, okay?
What was your favorite story loop today, Aaron?
Oh man, I mean, it's got to be the big old story that you just told. You know, that made everyone weep.
Oh. Yeah.
It's really good. That's why we're here.
Right.
You know, it's the whole point.
When we were at the camp out, I had my ex-husband and his wife sitting one place, and I had my current husband sitting another place, and I had my 44-year-old son and my 40-year-old daughter saying, "Hey, Mom, remember when you were dating that really idiot guy? You know, the one that wore the little tank top to the bowling alley? Oh my God, Katie, do you remember him? Oh, he was so weird." I'm like, hello, I have your dad and my husband sitting here. Could y'all like not be talking about me? And they're like, oh no. And they just went on and on while those two men stared at me like I was some kind of maniacal woman. And I thought, you guys are roasting me. And they, honestly, I did have to laugh. I laughed until my sides hurt because of all the things that they were saying about me in front of these two men that I love. So yeah, there are a lot of stories.
No secrets, right? That's the theme. Not keeping any more secrets. So they were just helping you out.
Right. No more secrets.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for everything. Thank you for teaching me some of my most important lessons. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for coming back and doing this, writing your chapter for this book. I can't wait until people read these stories and laugh their butts off and cry a whole lot, because that's what these stories make me do. So
thank you for the invitation, and I will always remember that retreat where Teddy just sort of stayed in the background and kept everything peaceful and quiet and safe. Yeah.
She made it safe for your 3-year-old to come out and play.
She did. And it's really important for me that I feel safe, and I felt safe there. So Teddy, thank you for that. You were part of that. And Amanda, thank you for not giving up on me, and thank you for not, for rejecting me, for making choices that had to be made.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you too. I love you too. And I know people are going to want to reach out to you after watching this podcast. So how can they connect with you?
They can go to.
Do you have a landing page?
Oh yeah, but I don't.
Do you have a link tree?
Wait, I have a. Hold on a second. Oh no, that's not going to work. I have a QR code. And I have a website, www.susangoodson.com. And I have a Calendly link, but I don't even know where to put that. So, and I have a phone number, which is 951-312-6347. And you will come up as an unknown, and I won't answer the phone. And then you can leave a message, and then I'll call you back. And my email address is sgoodsonmk@gmail.com. So that's as much as I got, and as techie as I can be at the moment.
It's perfect.
The honesty is everywhere.
Yeah. I'm learning and I'm willing, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you again. And thank you all for listening to this episode of Sips of Story and Sanity. If you like what you heard, consider subscribing, maybe leave us a review, and maybe even share your own "You Can't Make This Story Up" moment. You can also find more details about our upcoming collaborative book, You Can't Make This Story Up: What If It's All Happening for Us, at truetointention.com. That's it for today. Bye.
Bye.